Welcome. Today we're speaking with Nick Stone, who's the CEO of Bluestone Lane. Nick, welcome.
Good of you to be able to slot this in.
No problem at all, Nick. For you anytime. Nick, as we always do with these interviews, we have a quick fire few questions. Where were you born and raised in Australia?
Born in Melbourne, and I grew up in Brighton, and I last lived in Paran before I moved to New York City in 2010.
And for those who may not know, what did you do in Australia before moving to the US?
I was in banking and finance, so I was a banker, and prior to that, I was an AFL player for 6 seasons. So I've had 3 careers thus far, which is all very different and eclectic.
And what brought you to the US?
I was following my girlfriend, who's now wife, and I studied at business school as part of my MBA, and I was actually fortunate enough to be transferred with the bank I was working for, ANZ, as part of the rebuilding of the division in New York post the financial crisis.
Nick, COVID-19 has forced many businesses to pivot. How has Bluestone Lane done it better?
What we did immediately was act very decisively, and that was very challenging and in many cases heartbreaking, because we had to make decisions that impacted a lot of people, and we had to curtail our expenditure in the most dramatic way that I probably ever anticipated. We had done quite a fair bit of planning well before, I would say, the second week of March, where things dramatically changed in New York in particular. So we had different phases. What was the most extraordinary thing was we went from phase 1, which was some limiting expenditure and some small cost savings, through to phase 4 in 4 days. And then we actually implemented a new stage, a very draconian austerity, what we would call phase 5, which was implemented the following week after our board meeting, and that led to a dramatic change where we saw the majority of our team leave the business, significant pay cuts instituted, all capital expenditure ceased, and the majority of our stores closed, which is the way that the company is still now, that we have the majority of our stores are dormant and closed while we ride out this change. In addition, we determined what were the priorities, what were the pillars that we were going to remain focused on, and we identified those quite clearly. The first one was health and safety. We weren't going to compromise our team or our customer safety for the pursuit of economic profit or sales. We had to ensure that that was the number one priority, and that the business was entirely orientated around that. The second thing was all about ensuring that we can use technology to not only reinforce that pillar 1 around health and safety, but to drive greater efficiencies and to really reduce human contact and the service element of the business. It also gave us a way in which we could more powerfully communicate by focusing everything on technology and how we would communicate internally and externally. And then thirdly, we decided to look at the QSR brands, the large-scale, highly successful QSR brands. We decided that instead of declaring them as a part of the value chain that we don't want to be associated with, we realised that there was efficiencies and standard operating procedures that they have implemented over decades that are going to work very well. We don't want to change our product mix and our focus on health and our focus on freshly made, like the big QSR guys that typically have food sourced from commissaries that's frozen or high in sugar and high in fat. But we realised that there's so many elements to the business that we need to implement. So we said we want to be QSR inspired and influenced, which is really about being educated about how successful McDonald's, Starbucks, Yum brands have been in managing businesses very efficiently, but staying true to our core competency and our product mix and not compromising that. So, I do think that moving quickly, identifying our 3 focus areas, and really ensuring the focus on health and safety with being technology enabled, has put us in very good stead that we've been able to keep a certain number of stores open despite us having 50% of our total store count based in Manhattan.
So Nick, can you talk to a little bit about some of the charitable initiatives that Bluestone Lane has initiated during COVID-19?
It was very much a sort of groundswell within the company that we wanted to do something. And what we started was doing local drop-offs. And the first drop-off we did was actually at Elmhurst Public Hospital, which is really ground zero. Well, certainly was ground zero in the early stages of COVID in the US. We're seeing the most amount of deaths and probably the most amount of trauma. My brother Andy, who heads up marketing, he was such a huge motivator for the whole business to get orientated around it. And we felt like what we wanted to do was really involve the team and those who remain with actually supporting those drop-offs. So I did drop-offs myself to UCLA and also to the Children's Hospital in LA, but we ended up supporting about 35 different hospitals across 5 states and donating 45,000 cups of coffee and breakfast and things like that. And what was really sort of amplified our efforts is when we had a lot of locals, what we call, our customers are what we call locals, reach out saying, how do I support this? So we kicked off an initiative on our app, because that was the only way that you've been able to pay, which is via our own Bluestone Lane app since March 16th to ensure that all of our service is contactless. You could add a coffee, buy a coffee for what we call Fuel for Heroes. That was the campaign. And you can add a coffee to your order, and then we would match it. And we wouldn't just match it with 1 coffee, we would match it with 3. And the reason why we did that is the gross profit margin on a coffee is around 70%, 65%. And we realized, okay, if you buy 1, we'll donate 3 to ensure that we're not benefiting in any way. And it was sort of it was a bit of a metaphor for filling a drink holder. You have 4 slots, they buy 1, and you fill the remaining 3, and that sort of amplified the effort. We also every member of the executive team and operations team in New York worked at World Central Kitchen in Hudson Yards. So we probably donated around 80 hours there, or 100 hours as a company, which was fantastic too, especially because we were trying to keep the business going with such a lean team. And we are still now. Like, one of our core values, we have 4 values, and one's ride the wave. And the way that our team has responded with such a determination and resilience and courage to juggle multiple jobs when 65% of the support team, what we call BLHQ, were made redundant, has been remarkable, and to continue to support these community initiatives. So we've continued to try and do what we can, and we're proud of our efforts, and it's been a part of the Bluestone Lane story since day one. We've been very much a community brand. We're very much driven through word of mouth, that authentic experience, and that's what we decided with the community initiatives. We would do it ourselves. We wouldn't just sort of write a check or donate. We would actually make the product. We had the roastery still going. We could contribute with effort and passion and manpower rather than economic resources.
Nick, I've been speaking with a number of CEOs, and they're talking about Plan C, D, and E. Perhaps without giving away the farm, how do you see Bluestone Lane competing in what may well be the new economy?
If I look at just purely on how we're performing right now and where I think it's going to go, we currently have 20 stores open. We had 14 open for the first 3 months when this began, say around March 15th. March 16th was the day, the Monday. And we had complete cities where we had a number of stores closed. San Francisco doesn't have a store open right now. Philadelphia has no stores open. New York only has about 20%, 25% of stores open. DC, 50% of stores or 40% of stores. So we feel that we're probably going to be stable at 20 stores until September. Went past sort of Labor Day, and then we'll get a reading about what's the appetite for people to go back to work in these high density business districts, which is always been the focus for Bluestone, to focus on these captive areas and not really on an urban real estate strategy, not suburban. So we're in a reasonably precarious position from that perspective. So if people don't go back to work, and there's going to be very subdued demand. So we have to be very patient and see what happens. But I think with what we've learned, and there are tremendous silver linings, both personally that I've found and discovered, but also professionally. We were struggling with the cost structure and the uniformity of the economics, the store economics, as we got larger. We would have absolute winners, and then we would have stores that would dramatically underperform. And one of the huge challenges we had was around labour productivity and turnover. You might have remembered before COVID, the unemployment rate in New York City was actually right on 3% or slightly below. Now, that was the reported rate. The probably real unemployment rate is even lower than that, of talent that's really willing to work and that could be a fit for our business. And I think what we've learned is navigating some of the challenges with growing quickly and being such a human capital intense business, that technology and to support like the higher, more productive, the higher talent, the more focused and committed talent is going to really, really help us manage and probably provide a better experience. So what we did is we've been building a lot of, we've been investing a lot in our own proprietary app, and we had an order ahead function, and we actually now have a native delivery function. In addition, we built something that's brand new, and really no brand that we're aware of has it, is we have a now semi-contactless cafe dining experience. And prior to, for the viewers out there, we have two concepts. We have a coffee shop concept, which is really about takeaway and a bit like a hole in the wall that you find in the middle of Sydney or in Melbourne down Collins Street or something, and then certainly a cafe, which is more like a restaurant. It's a dine-in experience. It can work for takeaway, but it's primarily table service and dine-in. On our cafe business, we've never offered reservations, and we never accepted payment via our app because it was scanned via a QR code. And that we always thought that would be quite disruptive to the dining experience, that when you go to pay, you have to walk inside and scan your phone. But what we built is we built a way in which you can leverage that technology for dining in. And how it works is you have to have a Bluestone Lane app and use a user account to make a reservation. That syncs directly with Resi, which is the reservation platform. You're then bridged. So when you arrive and check in, you have your health check, and the concierge then takes you to your table. You scan a QR code with your phone. It immediately brings up the app. Your table's connected. Your reservation's connected for contact tracing. And then you order from your phone. But that whole experience has been designed through the lens of typically what you might experience in an Apple store. That you have great EQ and soft skills, which has been the bedrock of Bluestone Lane, a service-oriented brand. But then you have the technological background and understanding that you can navigate those customer service inquiries or how to use the phone proficiently, and ensure that the experience is very safe and limits that contact between our staff, but focus more on the guest dining experience. And we realize that a lot of people haven't been out to cafes for months, or they haven't seen particular people for months. Like the most of us, haven't seen friends since it started. So we thought the most sacrosanct part of this dining experience will be between those guests. It won't really be between our staff. And then there was obviously the risk factor. So all of that goes into one single loyalty program, one customer view. So now when you log on to your account, you can see transactions that have been curbside pickup, order ahead, native delivery. So when you've used the app to order and then we bid out the last mile, we use dispatch function to do it. We also have the cafe dining experience now, which is a proprietary technology. And then we also have e-com. So if you buy coffee beans online, everything goes into one platform, one single view, one loyalty program. So I think that for us, like, we're going to spend so much time on improving the way that those channels work, the experience works, and the power of the loyalty program. We've grown loyalty from 50, 60,000 to 100,000 in 3 months. And we now have a benchmark of getting to 150,000 loyalty members and doing a lot more with the tiering. And it's been something that we've been focused on for a couple of years, but this has really, really steeled our commitment to the initiative, because that's the way that big consumer brands really generate their loyalty and economic outcomes. If you look at Starbucks, 70% of all spend comes from Starbucks rewards members. If you look at Qantas, look at the spend that comes from Qantas frequent flyers. We feel like we have to focus more on that than ever, and that's one of the big silver linings from this unprecedented challenge.
Nick, what advice would you offer to any business facing a major pivot in how they operate?
I think right now that it's better to be decisive and try things than be passive and afraid of the repercussions. For most businesses, many businesses, things couldn't get any more challenging. You're right at the bottom. That is liberating. You're a bit unbridled when you know it couldn't get any worse. And that was certainly the case with Bluestone Lane. Our revenue fell 90% overnight. And we then, I think, realised that, okay, we've got to move here. We've got to trial things. We've got to rapid prototype and see what works. And we've got to, instead of that long planning phase and implementation, we might really stretch, and we might really sprint to implement some of these new initiatives. And that's what I'd encourage brands to do. Really think about the outlandish things that you've been hesitating or pontificating about, and give it a go. I think secondly, you've got to get a great support network. I really think that there's so many times where you're going to feel doubts. You're going to feel very dark. You're going to feel depressed and sad. I certainly went through a wave of commiserating the challenges that the company was facing, and more importantly, like the challenges that our current and former teammates were facing. And what I ended up doing is I got enormous support from my wife and my mum. They were both effusive. You've got to focus on the silver linings. You've got to focus on being positive. And that really acted as such a catalyst to get me out of a rut. So that would be the two things, I highly commend. Surround yourself with someone who can give you positive energy and optimism. And don't be afraid to trial now. Just realise that you've got to make the most of these conditions, because they are so tough. You might as well trial and see if it learns and see if it works for your business.
Well, there's an old saying in consulting that businesses run on people, process, and technology. And when you've got great process and great technology, you don't need a lot of people. So I suppose that sort of comes to the fore here in what you're doing, and having the dining experience as contactless as possible.
Yeah, I think for us, like, we need to have a slightly smaller team so it can be tighter and more sort of aligned and unified. And we need to dramatically slow turnover. It's everyone's aware that a lot of people venture into hospitality as a gap job. They see it as a way that they can work in hospitality quite flexibly and move on. And that also is just a tremendous challenge if you're the operator. So I think what we're focused on is really bringing into our organisation people who really love being part of hospitality. They love being part of a team. They love making people feel good. That is what hospitality is about. It's about making people feel good and satisfied. And we feel technology can sort of enable our best talent to work more efficiently and productively. And, I think that we just bit the bullet on some of these initiatives, and we realized that we were creating more complexity by ignoring the fact that people were moving in these directions. And without a doubt, the adoption of things like mobile ordering ahead, ordering at the table, using your phone and tablet, are going to be here forever. It's 60 days to form a new habit. And by the time that we really get out of this, I think it's going to be, mid next year, April. That's what I'm hoping for, where really consumer confidence is back and we've got the new normal.
Right.
I think people will forget the old ways of working and the old ways of interacting. Not completely, but I just think that we'll be conditioned and we'll learn to be more efficient, and we'll be learn to embrace certain change that we want to keep with. There'll always be a place for a lot of service in hospitality, particularly at fine dining, and we will always continue to make it a priority. It's just reshaping the business for the new environment and the way I think our locals will want to be served and engage with us.
Exactly. Well, Nick, I still remember our first coffee there at 3rd Avenue in the basement. Always a pleasure, and hopefully we'll catch up for that cold brew at some point.
Yeah, I hope so too, James. And thank you for having me on. Thank you for all the work that you've done in the Australian community and in being such an incredible resource, not only for Australians pre-COVID, but particularly through COVID. You've done an extraordinary job, and I know so many people out there appreciate it. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to chat today. And stay positive, stay safe, and we'll get through this. And final message is definitely for all the viewers out there: go out and support small business. Don't necessarily have to. If you support Bluestone, great, but there's so many other small businesses and proprietors out there that are being disproportionately impacted. So, the big supermarkets and grocery and the big CPG, they're going to be fine. But if you could go out there and support those small restaurants, cafes, hairdressers, mani and pedi, whatever you have, I know that that's going to be the most important thing, because we need that cosmopolitan, vibrant, society, particularly in New York. We can't have a big, homogenous brand, big MNC dominated world. It'll lose some of its special qualities. So that's all I've got to say on that matter.
All right, Nick. Thanks so much, mate. We'll see you around.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care, mate. Bye-bye.